Welcome back. We've got an incredible weekend lined up. This is going to be a ton of fun. We have 4 great panel sessions today. We're just getting started. Obviously today the topic is the vinyl revival. If you look up on stage, I think these guys know a little bit about it. Leon, I'm going to hand it over to you. You get the privilege of introducing this pretty motley crew. So I'll let you take it away.
Yes, Motley.
Thanks again everyone for being here.
Does anybody know this guy?
Yes, sir.
Michael Fremer with the Absolute Sound. And he's probably responsible for the vinyl revolution.
No, part of it, not all of it. I was there.
And Jeffery Coates with Project Audio, who makes some great turntables. You've been in the business how long, Jeffrey? 30 years? You've been in audio 30, 40 years?
Not quite 40. I'm very well preserved. Very well preserved.
Bryce with the Sound Org, who is the Riga importer into the U.S.
Yes.
And John Derda with Mofi, who makes a killer turntable, especially that Strato turntable. So thank everybody for coming. Did everybody have a good time yesterday? How many people were here yesterday?
Yeah.
Good crowd, great. So before we start, I kind of want to get a feel for the crowd. How many people in here do not have a turntable?
1, 2.
So not many.
3, 4.
How many people in here have what they consider a pretty good turntable? Okay, so we're going to change the question on you.
Well, maybe they want to buy one for their child, and we.
That's true.
Start them up early.
Yeah, we'll start up early. So we'll follow what we figured out here. So Michael, if someone's getting vinyl for the first time, a big ring, okay. For the very first time, what should they think about in a turntable?
So that was the question that I was asked to answer, but apparently a lot of you already have turntables, but I'll answer the question anyway. So the first annoying thing to me is when I hear someone buy a turntable for $75 in a suitcase, and then they buy a $50 version of Dark Side of the Moon to go with it, which makes no sense. So the first thing is you have to start at a certain entry level where there's a credible turntable that's both going to sound good and take care of your records. So that's step one. But the other step is, where are you going to put the turntable? And is it going to be on a desktop that's going to shake the turntable? And when you take a step, is it going to do that? So you have to decide you're going to be serious about this and put it someplace where it's a good environment to have a turntable. I mean, that's really step one. And the second thing is to have the infrastructure, to have a phono preamp, and have a place to put your records. And then also really key is to have a cleaning material to clean the records and to keep your stylus clean, etc. So there's a whole setup before you even think about what you're going to buy, and it's something that's important to think about. As far as what to buy, again, don't buy one of these suitcase inexpensive turntables if you don't have the money yet to buy something decent. And decent can start around $300 to $400. It doesn't have to be really, really expensive, although you'll find when you get started in this that as you improve things, it gets better and better and better. And I reached a point where I said, well, it can't get any better than this, and that was about 20 years ago. It keeps getting better, and you keep hearing more out of your records. It seems like there's just endless amounts of information in these grooves to get out. The other thing I think is really important, if you're new at this, is to get a turntable with a moving magnet cartridge where you can easily replace the stylus. That way, if you break the stylus, you can just get another one and replace it. If you don't know how to set up a turntable and you break a moving coil cartridge, you're gonna have to take the turntable back to your dealer, have them replace the cartridge and start over again. And so I think it's a good idea to start with a moving magnet cartridge.
Agreed. We get a lot of broken styluses from first-time turntables.
Now, if you want to talk brands, there was people on this stage who sell really good brands of turntables that are not extremely expensive. I mean, a Riga P1 is a great place to start among the entry-level turntables. But any of the manufacturers who are known in the industry for making turntables are not going to be making a bad turntable for you to start with. And you can start with an Ortofon OMA5, which is an inexpensive cartridge, and it'll take good care of your records, and it'll sound okay to get started. So I just think stay away from suitcases, stay away from brands you've not heard of, stay away from plinths, as they call it, made out of like chipboard. It's not going to give you a good experience. And you can get started for under $500. And once you get started, and like Leon knows, you go on Discogs, and you're toast. You're finished. Or you go to used record stores, or you go to, even at garage sales these days, you can still find lots of good records, and when, the us older people start going away, all these great collections are going to come on the market. There's going to be incredible records.
We're waiting for yours.
And the young, the young people are into this. It's incredible how many young people are, reading my website and come up to me at shows and tell me they've gotten into this and they just love records. So, that's the basics.
That is, and that's a really good point, thinking about the location of it. That's super critical. So the next question will probably appeal to more of you that have a turntable or think about upgrading it. So Jeff, the decision always comes down, should I upgrade my table or just get a better cartridge? Which should I do?
Wow. Well, I guess it depends. Do you have a great affinity for the turntable you currently own? So we get this all the time. Somebody will come in and say, well, I have this turntable. I'm just getting it back out of storage. It's been in the attic for 30 years. In that case, at the very least, that needs to be professionally serviced and should probably be replaced. Because I'm sorry, attics are not great places for complex mechanical devices to live for 30 years. The one thing, and kind of going back to the moving magnet, moving coil comment before, these will break. It's okay. This is a robust media. We've been doing turntables for a long, long time. This is not something you have to be afraid of. It's not as easy as a mouse click to get the settings to work properly. However, with a little bit of attention, a little bit of guidance from some good DVDs, some good setup videos, there's a lot you can absolutely expect that you can get. Yes, there we go. You can absolutely expect to get very, very good performance without being a complete expert. So that's, I would say, for a lot of people that maybe have that old, we can cast aspersion, we can say that 30-year-old Shure cartridge that really hasn't been used in many, many years, you should probably replace it. But don't be afraid of the process. It's relatively simple. We all include very good setup guides. There's a lot of material online and offline, of course, that can guide you through that. But I would absolutely, take a look at a good modern Stylus. These are mechanical devices. The suspensions fail over time. They are not evergreen.
So it sounds like you would say if you have a decent turntable, upgrade the cartridge. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. Start there. And this is the great thing. If you love the sound of that cartridge and you're like, I feel like I could get maybe a little more out of it, you probably can. But that's a great baby step to take. Start off with a new cartridge, maybe use that on that old automatic player that you really have from back in the day, and then upgrade the machine.
Good advice. So Bryce, Riga turntables, and everybody's turntable up here pretty much are all totally manual.
Yep.
Why is that?
Well, ultimately when you automate a process of a return, you've got mechanics in the process. In what is a turntable really? It's a vibration measuring tool. So anything that connects a tone arm to a task generally makes the tone arm less good at its job. So fundamentally that's where you've got the really sensitive part of record pickup, and then because it reaches the end of the side, that's detrimental to the result. You guys will probably all be aware of that from your own experiences. Some of you might not have heard that before, but certainly it affects the structural integrity of the task itself, which is why most of us in the main don't do it at all. That's the stance we have,
Yeah, I would agree. There's just less to go wrong.
Yeah, less longer
involved.
And they stress rigidity over adjustability. And that makes sense, especially at lower price points. Definitely makes sense. Because if you have a turntable that can do an arm that can do everything, but it's inexpensive, it's going to be moving in time. It's just going to be rattling and moving. So, those guys are like all about rigid and structural integrity, and that makes a lot of sense.
Thanks, Bryce.
Yeah, please.
So, John, we get this question a lot. You're trying to decide what to do. Maybe you're at a next level. You're getting your second turntable. How much should you put towards the turntable and cartridge as a percent? Should you start out with the most turntable you can buy, an entry-level cartridge, and then upgrade that? Or do 50-50?
Yeah. Well, first, good morning, everybody. And I want to say thank you to Leon and Jonathan and Scott for putting on this great event. It's really nice to be here. It's been a great show so far. That's a question we get quite a bit. I go back to when Ivor from Lynn kind of went around the country to prove that turntables make a difference. Fundamentally, the turntable is the platform of your system. So if you spend $10,000 on a cartridge and you're driving it down, it's like a Porsche on a plowed field with an entry-level turntable, that's not going to give you a great result. So I'm a big believer in you put the money in the turntable first and foremost. A great turntable could last you a lifetime, and I'm sure for some people here, you've had your turntable 20, 30, 40 years with just a little bit of maintenance, lubricating the bearing, changing the belt, aligning the tone arm. It should last you a lifetime. Or cartridges, I think Jeffy said they're not evergreen devices. You are going to upgrade and change that out over time. So I'd always recommend spend as much money on the turntable as possible. Great cartridges come, the OM5, the entry-level Audio-Technica AT95s are shockingly good values for the money. The entry-level Grado Black, I had to mount one on a turntable recently for a friend, and I was blown away by how musical and just rich that sounded for, $50. So you can get great cartridges for not a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, as you scale up, and we're showing a $9,000 cartridge in our room with the Piega speakers, there's more. Michael said there's more in the grooves. You'll definitely get that, but turntables is where you want to invest the bulk of your money.
Getting the most out of an exotic Stylus profile takes a lot more work. And if you put a cartridge with an exotic profile on a turntable and you don't set it up correctly, you're going to get worse performance and worse sound than if you went with one with, say, an elliptical stylus that's a little bit easier to set up.
Totally agree. Absolutely.
Also, if you're worried about doing this setup, get a $20 cartridge. Get like a least expensive Grado and just play with it and fumble with it till you get your hands used to doing it before you set up a good cartridge. And those things can sound pretty good if you set them up correctly.
They can. That is totally true. And I agree.
We're all in agreement. Let's go.
So, Michael, we know you probably play more than a record or two a week. How often should you clean your stylus, and what's your preferred cleaning method?
I think it's important to clean the stylus after every side of a record. And no matter how clean your records are, and if you could look under a microscope at the end of the side and see what's going on, you'll understand why you have to do it. It'll look fine. And it's easy to do it. I mean, even if it's just a brush, to just brush it, just do it as a part of the habitual thing of what you do when you turn the record over. Give it a quick cleaning.
Yeah, the stiff brush is great. So how often do you recommend the liquid cleaner on top of this?
Liquid cleaners, like a brand like Ortofon, where they cement their styluses to their cantilevers, they don't like liquids because they can sometimes dissolve the bond over time. But there's a couple of companies that make stylus cleaners, liquid stylus cleaners, where they've dipped an Ortofon cartridge into it and left it for like 6 months and it was fine. And there's a company called Audio Intelligent, and I used their liquid on my Ortofon, on my Anna D, which costs a lot of money, and it's never dissolved. So every couple of sides, I would use that.
Yep.
Carefully, not with a lot on it, but every side. And it's, once you get used to doing that, it's fine. And as you know, vinyl is a big hype, and it's all ritual anyway, and it doesn't really sound any good. But you've heard those people drive me crazy.
That's what they told us.
No, that's really good advice. I try to clean mine every side. Sometimes you forget, and then after about the third side, you're like, wait, what's that edge of distortion there?
And then you look under the microscope.
Yeah.
Or I hear from readers say, my cartridge doesn't sound so good now. and then I've been to their houses and I look under a microscope and I say, here's why. Look, you can't even see the stylus in it.
Yes, yeah, we get them into the store. We look at them under the microscope, and there's you can't see the stylus tip. So Jeff, I actually just got back into vinyl after 40 years about a year and a half ago, and pulled everything out. I've gone nuts buying used records. It's been a blast. So, Jeffrey, if you're buying used records and you can see dirt and grime, even there are no visible scratches, do you think there's a benefit to getting a wet cleaning system? And do you need one if you only buy new records?
Yes, full stop. Absolutely. And I know we have a member here with an ultrasonic system. I don't really care how you clean them, just clean them. This is something, and one of my favorite things to do is you find an old record, whether it's a thrift store or at a record store, you're flipping the bin, you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know they'd have this. You pull it out, and it's like, all right, you see some surface scratches, maybe isn't perfect, but there's a really good chance if that record's from the 60s or 70s, somebody back in the day was playing that with a conical or spherical stylus. So you get in there with a more aggressive modern elliptical or even a more exotic profile, you're going to be contacting portions of the groove that have never been played. So if you can actually clean that surface grime and actually get into the grooves, clean that dirt and accumulated muck of years out of the records, you're getting an amazing performance. So, and that doesn't have to be very expensive. I mean, a really good wet cleaner, fully manual, a couple $100.
Even a spin clean, just to get started.
Even a spin clean
Absolutely.
does a good job.
Just to get started, and it'll take care of your stylus too.
Yep.
Better care of your stylus.
Exactly. So we start, we're in the $500 range to kind of get started with a good wet cleaner. And that absolutely, that you're going to reach that point, and you'll see it in your record collection. Basically, it's like once you break that third cube in your Kallax, you're kind of that the ubiquitous, pardon me, the ubiquitous vinyl rack these days. You probably should have some kind of a wet cleaner. Pardon?
Yeah, I think you should start with one. I think if you buy a turntable, allocate some money for at least a spin clean level.
Yes.
Even new records are not pressed in clean rooms, they're pressed in dirty rooms.
Right.
And you think, I bought a new record, it's dirty. Of course it's dirty. The room is dirty. It's an old manufacturing process. So you should clean new records too.
Right. This is not they're not putting the Webb telescope, right? This is not, they're not building telescopes in these spaces. Like, this is a real, you've been to factories, everybody's been in those spaces. It's like, and imagine what they're doing, right? They're taking these vinyl pellets, they're melting them down, they're pressing them. It is a dirty business. Every new record you get, you should clean it before you play it.
Yep.
Yeah, fully believe. Going back, this is dating me. When we first opened Audio Vice, we bought a Keith Muck's record cleaning machine. I don't know whoever remembers that, with the string and everything. It was just amazing how much better the records sounded after.
Which is still a good way to, it's a good cleaning.
It's still a good cleaner.
Basic cleaning.
Yeah, it's still finicky.
And if you buy mono records, they could look like somebody stepped on them with golf shoes. You should still buy those because you can get into the. Like, I got a copy of Phil Spector's Greatest Hits in mono, original Phillies pressing. It looked totally trashed. I bought it just for the cover. I was going to hang the cover up, and then I cleaned it and played it. It was amazing, and you heard none of that stuff that was on the record. It played great, and it's still the best copy of that I've ever heard. So, for 50 cents.
Hey, well, there's a little something that's happening here. So y'all, if you have an opportunity to get out and hit the record stores today, you should probably do that before Mr. Fremer gets to get out and get through the
No,
bin.
let's go together and I'll hand you over the record.
There's a decided lack of really good values after he leaves a given community. So just get out there early.
So Michael brought up a point about placement. Bryce, what are some of the things to think about when placing a turntable in your room?
Well, ultimately, it echoes back to my point earlier that they're vibration measurement tools. So that sounds very technical, but fundamentally, you want to make sure it's not picking up energy from the speakers like the monstrous creatures we have in front of us, because you're gonna be at the detriment of the end result. So we often time we talk about wall bracketry and things like that being a genuine way to improve your result. I think you touched on that earlier, Michael, about just put it in the right place. You're committing yourself to this kind of process, and it sounds harder than it truly is. If you can get a turntable isolated, it'll knock your socks off. I often hear Rigas on tables between speakers, and then I say, could you put it on a wall bracket in this store or house? And then they put it on a wall bracket, and it's not just losing the footfall thing, it's genuinely a much better experience for the same material, and we're only about $200 north of where we started. Get your level out, and I'm not very good at DIY, but I'll give it a try.
I'm going to ask you another question. I didn't prep you for this. How do you feel about dust covers on the turntable when you're playing a record?
They're a bad idea because they add mass to what the tool is. So that's partly why our ones have tiny tongues, so you can take it away. Same with that creature down there. Play it with the lid. It's detrimental to the result. It's a dust cover, in my opinion. So it keeps the dust off, saves us hopefully some cleaning. But I get it. I've got a cat that will want to attack my turntable too. So it's for a function, but apart from that, that's it. Yeah, waste of time. So take it off if you can. Do a test yourselves. Sounds like a lot of you have turntables. Take the lid off if you can, and then play it with and without. And then you can write me an email saying, oh, you're right.
The more tweaky and expensive your turntable is, the less likely it is to have a dust cover.
That's true.
Just a fact. And the dust cover is a rattly, shaky thing, and the vibrations from the speaker is going to rattle the dust cover, and it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
So John, people are buying a lot of records, and they're thinking about, there's this paper sleeve. Should I replace that? And then I've got all these records. How should I store them? How should people think about that?
Yeah, I think the storage one is easy. Vertically. If you ever saw the movie High Fidelity, when Rob is reorganizing his record collection autobiographically, his coworker comes in, or his employee, and says, you really shouldn't stack them all together on the floor. It's going to compress the grooves. That's somewhat true, but you definitely want to go vertical. You don't want to warp your records. You don't want to pack them too loose or too tight. There's an art form to this. Many of us have the calyx that Jeff mentioned for our record collections. I don't know if there's a more affordable way to safely store our records, but definitely vertically and pretty tight. You don't want things leaning over to get warped. Then in terms of inner sleeves, as a vinyl collector, you tend to be a little bit of an OCD personality. I think we can all attest to that. I'm not going to get into the science of different record sleeves, whether polyethylene or different plastics make a difference. I will tell you, every single new record I get, I won't even play it until I've cleaned it once or twice, usually twice, quite frankly, and replaced the inner sleeve. It could come with a nice plastic inner sleeve. If it comes with paper, I'm throwing that in the trash immediately. The abrasiveness of the paper, the detritus inside of the sleeves. Like Jeff said, it's a dirty business pressing records. So replacing the sleeves, critical. So recommend cleaning the records with whatever method you have. Replace those inner sleeves. I typically, if there's branding on the inner sleeve, I'll save that too. In the outer sleeve of my record. So Mofi makes some great inner sleeves. A lot of companies do. For $20, you get 50 new sleeves. Highly recommend doing that.
Yeah, save the inner sleeve if there's like catalog numbers and catalog pictures on it, because when you resell that record someday, if you don't have that, the serious collectors, they don't think it's authentic.
Yeah, that's a good point. John, I got another question for you. Surprise one. Record weights. You guys make have a weight that Mike Latmus helped design. How should people think about record weights? Are they suitable for every type of turntable? When should you use them?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're suitable for every type of turntable. A lot of turntable designers have a preferred method. They might have a clamp that's specifically designed for their turntables, and that's usually the way you should go. We do make an aftermarket weight that Mike Latvis, who owns HRS, great rack manufacturer and expert in vibrations and isolation, designed for us. I will tell you, the way he does it, it's meant to quiet down your turntable. It's not meant to flatten the record. How could you flatten the record with just a weight placed in the center of the label? What he does, it drains away noise from the bearing, and it absorbs it and dissipates it, basically converts it into heat, so that your turntable becomes quieter. It's not about making your record flatter. So that's the first kind of misconception that I think people commonly think about. With everything in this hobby, experiment. It's gonna vary. I find that 9 out of 10 times, I like what the weight does, but there's some turntables, quite frankly, it might kill the sound a little bit. So most great retailers like Audio Vice have a return policy, so I highly encourage you to experiment for yourself. I'd probably avoid too much mass. We have a formula that says about you want your platter to be about 5 times the weight of whatever the record weight is. So we don't want to exacerbate wear on your bearing. That's a rule of thumb. Again, refer to your manufacturer. You can call Project, Rega, anybody, and they can tell you, hey, if this is going to be compatible, if it's going to work or not.
That's a really great point about the mass ratio.
Yeah, mats make a huge difference, especially on lighter platters. And there are so many different mats you can get. There's cork mats, there's felt mats, there's the mats that you get with a Riga, and they're very doctrinaire. They still believe that the mat they give you is the one you should use. Roy is very doctrinaire. Roy Gandy, who runs the company, is very doctrinaire about certain things. Roy, at one point, said you should never clean your records with any kind of fluid or clean them at all because the stylus will push the dirt out of the way. That's what he told me. So I went record shopping in the UK once and brought back a stack of records from Beano's, which was the greatest used record store. And I went to Roy's house and I started playing records without cleaning them in any way. And halfway through the record, the arm literally lifted up and hung in the air. I said, Roy, come on, you got to change what you think about cleaning records. But I don't think he ever has he?
No.
I love that guy for that. I like the fact that he sticks to his guns, but you have to stick to your guns. So the other thing about record weights is that when the stylus is going through the grooves, it's creating a tremendous amount of energy, and that energy is spreading through the grooves. So if you can just damp that energy down and keep it located right where the action is happening, it's going to sound better.
One of the things that really surprised me and continues to, it's like every single thing you do in an analog system matters. Mat material matters.
Yeah.
Leather sounds different than cork, which
Yes,
sounds different
exactly.
than felt. It all makes a difference. You just sort of get it, you get this point, it's like, I'm getting off the bus here. It makes a difference. I understand it makes a difference.
You
but it's
never
like,
get off the bus.
No, of course not.
And
you maybe get off and you kind of have a coffee because you're at that stop,
Yeah.
and then you get back on because you're like, it could probably be a little better.
And then the people say, well, that proves this is all a joke because you can keep changing the sound all the time.
But I love it. I
Of
love
course, you make it sound
And
the way you want it
different- Yeah, the
to
different
sound.
weight materials, right? I mean, you use something like the HRS design weight, it's fantastic. But you start with something, don't do anything that's detrimental to the mechanical system.
Exactly.
That's really the only rule. Everything else, you're going to play with it, you're going to enjoy it, you're going to get more out of your table. I mean, we've done things to hot rod a $300 or $400 table that you wouldn't even believe.
Yeah.
You get unbelievable performance as long as the basic mechanical devices sound.
Just watch out for the stupid stuff on the internet about things you should do, like use wood glue.
Never.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you probably saw it on some
Sure.
of these TikTok video and they were talking about a diet cleanse or a cleaning hack, for their home kitchen the day before,
Yeah.
probably avoid it.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially if you've got a turntable like a Riga, where they've designed every single thing from the ground up, the cartridge, the tone arm, the turntable to work together. Mm-hmm. You don't want to modify that, really.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
Yeah, we know what other people are doing. We investigate some of the ideas. Most of them are wrong, and that's why we don't do it. We don't. There are some ideas that were really smart that we have adopted, but most of them are not additive. They're just changes, and that's we've all experienced that with our own systems, not specific to vinyl. Is sometimes changes are perceived as betterments, and you've got to be cognizant of that and say but to your point, you try it. If you like it, keep it. But from an engineering stance, some of the things we'll steer well clear of. Extra mass is problematic for us.
Okay, so everyone's going to get a chance here. We'll start with John. Tell me your 2 favorite ways to find vinyl. Now, working for Mofi, you can leave that out, but
Like, go to the warehouse, select a record.
Well, fantastic. My first day on the job, that's exactly what happened. One of the guys there said, well, you know, as a welcoming gift, take some records. Like, well, what does some mean? Well, you know, whatever you need. I had to go get the hand truck to load up the car. It was amazing. I was just at a record store in Chicago earlier this week, and they had a huge record collection. I really don't have a scientific method to this. It's literally just flipping through bins, and you feel it. You feel something. If you never heard of the artist before, then maybe the cover catches your eye, or the label is probably my most common method. I've just recently gotten into jazz in the last few years, so I'm trying to flesh that collection out. And you look at Pablo or Impulse or Blue Note, and chances are it's going to sound good. You're going to like the style of music. That's how I've really kind of fleshed out that collection. But then the second way is really just friends in the industry. I mean, we all talk all the time. And man, have you heard this? David Solomon, the Flash DJ of Qobuz. That is a great way to discover new music. And more new vinyls being pressed now than, I mean, Michael probably knows the numbers better than I do. It's incredible that virtually any new title you want is now available on vinyl. And it wasn't that way 10, 20 years ago. It was a rarity. So we're really living in the golden age of record collecting, in my opinion. You know, talk to your friends, discover the labels you like. And then I guess the third thing is Discogs, you mentioned earlier. I tend to find mastering engineers that I really like, because for me, it's not just about the music. I'm a self-acclaimed audiophile. I like the way things sound. That's very important to me. And so seeing who the great mastering engineers are is usually a great way to find other really good sounding LPs.
And Discogs is a great source for that, the way you can sort and find things.
Does everybody here use Discogs? How many people use Discogs? Yeah, less than half, but download that app, start putting your collection into it. You can see the value of your collection as well. It's a great thing for insurance if you ever have a fire or a flood or something. But there's so much metadata inside of it. You know, the credits in Discogs, finding out who the bass player was, who the mastering engineer was, who the mixing guy was. Highly recommend getting that app.
Thank you. Bryce.
Oh, John's got all the good answers there. I'll start first. Same story. I go to stores. I remember certain things from when I was a younger man. And really, to your point, you're browsing, and it's the connection rather than it is anything else. And Discogs, great resource that it is, but genuinely, it's industry people. For me, I know a lot of people, and kind of both record stores and audio establishments, and it's the connection. It's David Solomon racking up records, good stuff. You know, that's the truth in it. I don't have a particular avenue to get things, but I always visit my stores when I'm in town. You know,
I'm right there with you. That's one of the greatest things about this gig is we get an opportunity to travel. I live in Austin, Texas. We've got a lot of stuff that you just can't find at home. And then come to Raleigh. Cool, you want to get a Sir Douglas Quintet record? You probably can do that here, because somebody's like, I didn't even know who these guys were. So just that opportunity, dive into a local store, go deep in those genres that you already love from home, and then also don't be afraid to experiment. I mean, some of the greatest things, they're accidental. You know, you find that record that you're like, maybe you chose it because you love the cover. Like, wow, this is amazing. Following labels. I mean, SST, that was a favorite of mine. Just like, any sort of like, they always did a bunch of great punk and hard rock stuff. There's a couple of stinkers in the catalog, there always will be. But a little shout out to the independent record stores everywhere. We don't get to do what we do without these shops existing. So wherever you live, wherever you're visiting, stop in, check out those shops, buy a couple records, bring them home. Always take a chance. That's one of the great things about the hobby.
School Kids Records in Raleigh.
There we go.
Yes.
School Kids. All right, we'll look it up.
The regional thing is really interesting, because when you do travel and you go to record stores in other areas than from where you live, you see a whole different mix of used records and things that you don't see at other places. And so you just start buying things you've never seen before. And that's how it accumulates and gets really bad. You know, buying records in the 1990s was the best ever. I just can't tell you what that was like, because everybody was getting rid of their records as if
were
it was some sort of carcinogen. Get rid of these records, and it was like $1 a record, whatever record you wanted was
We drive
$1.
up from Philly to the Princeton Record Exchange.
Princeton
and we
Record
just, like,
Exchange was
come
insane. It was
home with
insane.
bags and bags, and
But-
it was unbelievable.
Yeah,
But
that was unbelievable. What are you people doing?
right.
Oh, we want a CD now. Okay, fine. Now those people are all back buying records again, and they've
Yep.
woken up to the mistake that they made, especially the older records. My favorite way to buy used records is to fleece unexpecting widows. You walk into their house. And no, I'm just kidding. I say things like that, and people take it seriously. Like someone said, "How do you organize your records?" And I said, "By race." And I was just kidding. And it's terrible. People don't have a sense of humor anymore. But the most fun really is finding records at garage sales for $1 that are great. It's just too easy to go to Discogs and pay $500 for a record you really want. That's not fun. That's if you must have something, you do that. But the most fun is finding records at garage sales for a couple of dollars that are great.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, and that whole music, that record culture, that music exploration. I'm so excited about that part. I mean, our friend David at Cobuzz, of course, he's done more on the streaming side for his various employers over the years to bring us into that. But I love that. That's why I've been carrying around records for 30 years. I mean, I remember being the only guy at a retail store that would actually mount a cartridge for somebody. Because everybody had gone to CDs. It was kind of over. But it's wonderful to see this resurgence, and thank you all for participating. Like, this is wonderful to see a room full of people that are into vinyl, into the culture of playing records, that love to explore different music. I mean, it is a pain in the neck. I mean, I love that New York Times, what is it? What is the expense or the,
You love
two
the
things-
inconvenience.
The inconvenience and the expense are my two favorite things about playing records. But it's like, it's more than that. It's really a great way to connect with music.
Well, and Cobuzz and Tidal are great too, because you can
Of
go through
course.
there and now find a 50-year-old record, play it there, see if you like it, see if you're willing to spend that high price on Discogs for that.
Any of
See
the
if you like the music.
big dollar reissues, it's like, if I haven't heard it or haven't heard it recently, I always preview it in digital and be like, all right, no, this needs to be part of the permanent collection.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just such a fun hobby, though, and it can expand, and you run out of room. So we've got some time for audience questions.
Yeah, right here. Didn't waste any time, thanks. First of all, I want to thank Lee and the whole audio device team for putting this together. This is fantastic. I live in Raleigh, so it's a real bonus to have this here. I've been an audiophile for years. My dad built a Heath kit with Wharfdale speakers at home back in the 50s with plugs in every room for remote speakers, right? So it was pretty awesome. And I just, DNA, call it DNA. I had the opportunity of working in a warehouse style Tower Records type of record store while I was a student. So at a tender age of 15, I started my record collection. First album, Beach Boys Live in London, UK, of course. There you go.
Auspicious beginnings.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get a little touchy here, and I'm gonna put John maybe a little bit on the spot, right? So many of you might have heard this whole mobile fidelity.
No Mofi questions.
No.
We've had enough.
That's not really where I'm going. The question, and this is to all of you on the panel, does it really make a difference to vinyl?
I'm sorry, does what make a difference to vinyl?
The digital source converting to vinyl. So if you're familiar with the whole mobile, John's getting my question.
What does he ask?
Sure.
He's asked
So
about the
does it
Mofi
really make
scandal.
a difference in the
What
whole
scandal?
development of a vinyl, the mixing and the turning to analog in terms of sound quality, depth, width, right? The whole 9 yards. Does it really make a difference that part of that source was digital?
I appreciate your question. This MoFi gate phenomenon has been very interesting to see firsthand. I think Michael and I have both been a little bit of a part of it. Your question is very good because you're asking about the end result, and it's really about the sound. Does it sound good? Is it going to connect you closer to the music? Everything makes a difference. I'm not a mastering engineer, so I'm not going to get too into the weeds here. But every single step, the interconnects you use from the tape machine the mixing desk make a difference. The quality of the power in the studio makes a difference. So does adding a digital step make a difference? It certainly can. I think when we hear the word digital, a lot of us cringe and think about, well, MP3, and some records were mastered using MP3 files when the whole vinyl phenomenon has really taken off. The converters make a difference. So I would say for mobile fidelity, the end result is, can we get as close to the master tape as possible? And whatever step we have to do to get there, the mastering engineers are going to do. They've been doing this since 1977, remastering records. They've tried everything from half-speed mastering. They have custom electronics there because they want to extract every molecule of information off that master tape. There's a really great interview in the Absolute Sound that Jim Davis, the owner of Mofi, did with Robert Harley that explains this process in much more detail to tell you the steps that they take to get that kind of sound.
I have a question.
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
So I try to give my honest opinion, and I don't worry about people being upset with me. So two opinions I've always had is that when Stan Ricker, who originally was mastering for Mobile Fidelity, he regularly boosted the bass and boosted the treble to give it a different sound, and that's what he did. And you can go back and listen to whether it's Some Girls or Sticky Fingers or the Beatles box. That's what he did. He changed the sound to make it the way he liked it. And I feel that Mobile Fidelity has consistently done that, whether it's from a digital source or an analog source. They definitely boost the bass, and they do a little bit to the treble. That's what they do. Just like the jackets they give you and the labels they give you are not the original labels. They change it in some way, and I think that's part of their philosophy. And if you like that sound, then fine. Some of them come out great, and some of them don't. As far as the digital goes, obviously they should have said what they're doing to begin with. They said they cut half speed. That's what they were doing. They stopped doing that at some point. It's never a good idea to do something that you don't tell the consumers you're doing. It's just, and they're going to pay a price for that, unfortunately. If they think that's better, they should tell you that. At one point, I started noticing that I wasn't liking some things I was hearing, and I would talk to them about it. And I never thought they had changed from using analog to a digital file, because I trusted that they weren't, because they said they weren't. But something was not right to me, and I reviewed a few of those records and just said I didn't like how they sounded. They were not happy with me for saying that, but I didn't like how they were sounding. And then some of them I just didn't. I'd rather review things that are good and tell people something they could buy that's good, rather than go there and say negative things about records. So, when they did Dire Straits' Brother in Arms, when they did the first Dire Straits record, and I had one cut from an analog tape by Bernie Grundman that was a reissue, and I compared them, I just didn't review that record because I didn't think theirs sounded right. And then people say, well, you didn't hear it was digital, you can't tell the difference. You can hear something's different. You can. And I'm going to come to a show and I'm going to bring records and let you hear differences. And people might like that one better than that one. They're different. And which you prefer is a different issue. And I don't think it's because it's the digital part of it necessarily. It's a different sound.
A bit of this sounds like Dylan going electric.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, it's different.
That's
but
right.
it's a different way to do it, and it's still great. I mean, we could go back to purists and say, hey, the only way to really cut a record is the group of people have to be in the room, and we're going to do an acoustic recording. Absolutely no electronics in the path. I mean, we've been messing with this since the 1920s, y'all, right? There's always something changing.
Right.
Yes.
The final result, though, y'all putting out some great sounding records. They might not be exactly what the original pressing was. This is sort of Tempest in a Teapot for me. I'm just like, they're great records, they're beautifully produced.
It's just Tempest in a Teapot, except for the fact that you should say what you're doing.
Disclosure is important.
Especially when you say
Disclosure
original
is
master
important.
tape, right? I mean, they set
Absolutely.
themselves up for something
Disclosure
they didn't
is
have
important.
to. They
Okay, so let's have a question about hardware.
Love it.
If I could just jump in 1 second. I mean, one thing I'll tell everybody, we are going to be playing the Thriller test pressing in the Big Piega room. Just got that. Obviously, you're invited as well. And we'll compare to the original pressing, which sounds phenomenal. It's really well done. That's really what matters at the end of the day. I said it earlier, you got to listen, compare, judge for yourself. There are so many variables in a system, in playback, but what I really don't want anyone to feel like at the end of the day with this story is that somehow digital trumps vinyl. And that digital, if Michael couldn't hear digital, that doesn't make any sense because there's so many variables in cutting a record, equalization, the age of the tape. People that have that agenda trying to say that we're all crazy for buying vinyl are just dead wrong, in my opinion.
Exactly.
It's not just about the experience, the communal thing. Vinyl sounds different. Whether there's a digital step in it or not, vinyl delivers a certain kind of sound, a lot of it due to your playback equipment, your cartridge, your turntable. That for me, I could listen to a DSD flat transfer or a master tape, or we have access to many different things, but I always come back listening to my records and listening to vinyl. I think it's the best experience. It brings me closest to the music. So.
That's right. All the ones that argue against that say it changes the sound. Everything they did from the microphone down changes the sound. The microphone changes the sound the most from what it sounds like live. So everything changes the sound. So if the final step is to cut a lacquer and change the sound again, and it's the sound that you like, that's fine. That's what it's all about.
Well, if it comes down to it, we're all hearing it differently. We all have a different turntable. We all have a different cartridge. Our records are in different condition. It's in a different room with different speakers. Yeah, it's all so different. So
unlike video, which is a calibrated system. When they master a video, it's all the same calibrated system.
True.
I have a question for Bryce.
We
I'm
have
in
one-
trouble now.
I think a plus with what you do is it preserves the tapes.
Yes.
They're old, and they can only play so many times.
You're true.
Thank you. That's certainly an aspect of what the guys at Mobile Fidelity do. They consider themselves archivists. They're trying to preserve the tapes. They have some great stories about the conditions of tapes and how they've had to be restored by our engineers. But you're right, these tapes aren't going to last forever. So in fact, the fact of capturing these, Sony invented the DSD technology to archive their master tapes because they recognize that kind of blues tape can't be played 1 billion more times. So progress is being made. We all want the same thing. We want the greatest sounding records possible.
Well, while we're still on the subject, Michael, would you consider for the consumers of your Track and Angle website, when you're posting album reviews, to list the provenance of the album, whether it's AAA or whatever?
I'm still in airplane flight mode. My ears are.
On your website, when you review records, would you discuss the whole chain? Is it all analog? Was there digital in the chain?
And when I play records,
Well, when you do a review of a record,
I don't know what that means.
would you state that it's pure analog or there's some digital in the chain?
In my system?
No,
No.
in the review of the record.
Are you asking if you want him to state the provenance of the record
know.
based on what the
the
label
old
is
CD,
providing or what he is hearing?
Well,
Just would you talk about the whole signal chain? It's like this is actually an analog pressing from the original analog.
You mean when I review records?
When you review
well,
records,
I
that's what
try to, but this stuff we learn every day. For example, everybody likes Norah Jones's first record, Come Away With Me. Now I'm learning that it was recorded on 2-inch analog tape, but the master, may have been mixed down to a DAT. Right. I'm trying to get that straightened out now. And so this is how many years later? 20 years later? So if it was mixed down to a DAT, it's not really AAA. It's going to be AD, and then cut to a record as ADA. That's the American Dental Association. Right. That's really what the problem is. We don't know a lot. We know a lot about a lot of records. If you get a Blue Note that was done, a Tone Poet Series Blue Note done by Joe Harley, cut by Kevin Gray. That's cut from the master tape if it was an analog tape, and that's that. And so we know a lot of things are cut from master tapes, and they're all analog. But sometimes when it says mastered from the original analog tape. What the record label is saying is they took the original analog tape and they digitized it, and then they're cutting from that. So we're trying to get a SPARS code. There's an organization, they're making vinyl people. We're trying to get a group together to come up with an accurate, honest SPARS code for vinyl record releases. So when you buy a record, you know if it was analog, 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 or analog, analog, digital analog, or what it was.
Right.
And I think that's useful, actually.
Sounds like I'm being summoned.
Yes.
Yeah, someone had a
Love
question
it.
for Bryce.
I've had a belt-driven turntable for years.
Uh-huh.
And you spoke about removing the dust cover and all the other variables in it. In my listening room, it's exposed to, I don't know, the atmosphere.
Uh-huh.
It's not isolated. So there's wind that goes through there, and sometimes my windows are open and things like that.
Sure.
So I'm looking to move towards a direct drive turntable.
Okay.
Which I understand the theory, right? If you have belt driven, it isolates the motor and there's no vibration. But I'm kind of feeling that it's more stable that way if you have a direct drive rather than having a belt, because the belt itself is also another variable, right? Because it does have a spot on it if you don't use the turntable a lot, right? So that's my question. Are there good direct drive turntables out there that sound as good as a belt driven one?
I've never heard one. So there's a quick summary. Effectively, you got a computer correcting a motor at speed. So it will slow up and speed down and up and down. And Michael's probably are much more exotic things than I have. But I've never heard
Every
one.
technology has issues, every single one. And I remember when the first linear tracking air-bearing arm came out, and I said, that solves every problem. That's the greatest thing that was ever made, and I bought one. But it had many, many problems. One problem with that is the air pressure in the bearing is extremely high. The air pressure at the gap where the air comes out is like when you blow up a balloon and let it go, and it goes like that. So the whole thing is vibrating like that, creates all kinds of problems. So whether it's belt drive or direct drive, they all have problems.
Yeah.
So
It's a balance of compromises.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It is a
life
corollary
is
to that. I think you can get very good sound. I mean, we don't build one project, right? We don't build a direct drive table either. Feel very strongly that for a given amount of money, and that's really the key, if you had 40 grand to spend, you could probably find a very, very good direct drive table. If you're spending $500 to $1,000 or $2,000, it's a little harder. The guys at Techniques, I think, have done a fabulous job. All those reissues of those tables. It's great. They're really good, but they still strike me more as a tool. It's like if you need to use it professionally, it's got to come up to speed. You're in a broadcast environment. You're doing mixing. Yeah, you shouldn't buy a belt drive table. There's absolutely those cases, but I believe for a given amount of money, best performance, absolutely, there's going to be a belt drive system.
I reviewed, at the same time, a $500,000 Tech DOS Air Force Zero turntable. It was in my house, belt drive. And at the same time, I had a $300,000 direct drive OMA turntable. And I reviewed them both, and they sounded very different. And I sent files to Bob Ludwig. I'm sure many of you know the name Bob Ludwig. And Bob liked the belt drive one better from the files I sent him, and I liked the other one better. So is it, well, Bob liked that one, that has to be the better one? No, that's not how it works. You have to listen and decide what you like, ultimately.
I wanted to mention a couple. I started buying records locally in the 70s here. And one of the places that was not, School Kids is great, but for this crowd, I also wanted to mention Books Do Furnish a Room. It's in Durham. I was lucky enough to find Down to Earth Jimmy Buffett for $2. And for just a couple dollars, the Blade Runner soundtrack, which nobody could find back then. The one that's local right here in Raleigh is called Nice Price Books. They expanded into 3, vinyl cutback, they're down to 1, but still nice. Even though these are both called bookstores, I go there for vinyl. So School Kids is great, they only do records, but if you want to find stuff that you can't find, I don't usually tell people these secrets. I don't even think I've ever mentioned it to Leon. I told him when I found Down to Earth, but I didn't tell him where I found it. But check out these places, they're great. And then you were talking about, I have a soda. So my hardware question is, a local audio store told me about a static tweak. And the way they set it up for me is it hangs from the dust cover on my soda. I don't know if I still need that or if that was just a tweak. So I was wondering, and I know I can, try to listen A, B, but since I've heard so much about take the dust cover off, it got me thinking, well, I wouldn't have my static tweak anymore. So could you guys comment on the whole static thingy tweak deal? Because static didn't come up today. Cool.
Well, thank goodness.
Do you understand? Should I
Y'all are in a
explain?
high humidity environment. So I've played records at altitude, and I got to tell you, it's way worse trying to play records in Denver than it is down here closer to sea level. So I mean, that static, it's a thing. So your particular system, did you have an issue where you were experiencing something because of static? It was causing.
This is probably 30 years ago when I was doing every tweet that I heard about from Allan or whoever.
I don't even remember it actually.
Right?
I'm trying to.
You don't remember that one?
No, I don't remember that one,
What
Jeff.
it was is it hangs. It's about the width. It's about the width of a record. And I think you guys were getting the supplies from like a camera place. It wasn't really from an audiophile type place. And you said this will kill all static as you're playing the records, whether you have carpet, whether you don't have carpet, humidity, no humidity. And I've had it ever since, of course. So, but I'm gonna give it up if I start taking my dust covers off. All right, so maybe.
I would guess that taking your dust cover off is going to be a net positive versus this anti-static doohickey thing that I'm not sure what it is. But if static is a real issue with playing records, definitely at altitude. Wet cleaning records helps with that the first time around. A zero stat. How many people have a zero stat little gun? Maybe your kids played with it. Zapped each other.
It's good for coffee grounds too.
Yeah.
When you grind your coffee and they stick to the.
I use it on my grinder too.
Yeah.
It's a handy thing. So I would say a zero stat is recommended if you do have a static issue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, we have time for one more question.
Thank you.
Get a microphone.
Our handsome runner is running.
Oh, yes.
Why do all the audio advice guys run?
They're very fit.
Good morning, gentlemen. I am retooling a combination of antique and new equipment. So I would like you each to kind of touch on a little bit. I know we talked about vinyl in the traditional format of the turntable, but I have inherited a massive stack of vinyls, and it was from a widower male. So I have a Selectomatic 100 jukebox that's playing, I think, 33 45s. I have the Technic turntable that I'm looking to find thank you.
Yeah.
Cartridge. And also I have two receivers. One I really love is a Sony, and I noticed most of the new receivers do not have this feature where you could select the type of sound, like Hall, live, rock, classical. I love that feature, and I haven't found it in a new one. So I would like to address you gentlemen, power conditioners and photo amps too versus regular, or should I just stay within what's provided with my receiver?
Great question.
Thank you.
There's a lot.
I was going to
There's a
say,
lot of
I'm unwrapping a lot there.
Yeah. But first off, I'm very, very, very jealous that you have a jukebox. I think that's sort of, for all of us, I would love to have a jukebox. I mean, it's sort of the antithesis from a performance standpoint of everything we do. But my God, they're fun. Yeah. Do you have one?
What?
A jukebox?
I'd love to have jukebox.
Wow. Of all the people that should, I feel like we should
I have no
collectively,
room. I have no
right?
room.
This is true.
It's full of records.
So we probably should take a lot of that question offline because there was a lot about sort of 90s AV receivers versus what's available today. Kind of what happened to a lot of those DSP formats, and I think that's something that as you go around and maybe get some of the theater demos today, you can see sort of what can be done to get a lot of that information from a 2-channel source like a record. I know it's sort of anathema to us a bit, but ProLogic 2, the DTS ES, all these formats can extract a lot of information. You can hear it in a multi-channel way. That's super fun. So we'll take a lot of this offline.
And Dynaco had a system in the
Right?
70s.
Yes,
Yeah,
they did.
the old Hafler.
Yeah, and
the
it
old
worked-
Hafler left,
worked well.
Left,
You could get-
left plus rate, left minus rate.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, guys, we're out of time.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I'd recommend talking to somebody at Audio Advice. I mean, there's so many questions to unpack there. They know about power conditioning, phono preamps, everything that you need. So an individual, maybe Leon, you can recommend somebody to talk to. Or
I mean, power conditioning, the first thing you should do before you get a power conditioner is start from your roof of your house, if you have a house, and rewire it from where the electricity comes into your house down into your panel and into your room, because that was the biggest difference. And change your grounding scheme, make sure your grounding scheme is good. That made the biggest difference in my stereo system.
So I want to thank everyone for participating today, and thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Hope it was beneficial.